brand new temple and a really old one today on the Bible in 1 year with the preacher's husband. Today we're going through Ezekiel chapter 40 and 41. Tomorrow we're going to go through Ezekiel chapter 42 and 43. So let's get started. So there were a couple of temples that happened, right? There's King Solomon's temple that was finished in about 957 BC. It was started before that. And then there was also Herod's temple that came later. But what about this third temple, Ezekiel's temple? That's the one we're talking about today. So in chapter 40, it starts out with by saying, in the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th day of the month in the 14th year after Jerusalem had been captured, and on that very day the Lord's hand was on me. Remember that? The Lord's hand's on him again. And he brought me there. So he's physically taking him to this place in a vision. So this date, in the 25th year of our exile, is the 13th and final date formula that Ezekiel talks about here. This was April of 573 BC. So this was 12 years after the oracle in chapter 32. It was 14 years after the destruction of Jerusalem, and 20 years after Ezekiel's first vision of the temple. Now, the 10th day of the first month marked the beginning of the Passover that was celebrated 4 days later. And the 25th year was the halfway point to the next Jubilee year, when freedom and release would be observed. Remember talking about that Jubilee in Leviticus chapter 25. So Ezekiel's taking this angelic tour, and he's got this guide, this angelic tour guide, that begins his tour outside of the temple. And they talk in depth about the dimensions of the temple, and as they go through it, and there's this paved surface, as you can see on the outside edge there, that kind of serves as something like a border around the outside edge of the outer courts. And now along that pavement there were 30 rooms that were used by the Levites, maybe for meals or as other Israelite temples, I don't know. But there were 30 of those, as you can see, those blocks around the edge. There's 5 on each side of each gate, so that'd be 10 on each side, so 30 going around. And of course, there are all of these other ones. There was no western gate on this temple because the temple occupied the western side of the compound. If you look at the top left side over there, that's going to be the western end of the temple structure. And of course, that big temple sitting there. There's no gate. There's only a gate on the north, south, and east side. So there's your reference there for that. And I found it interesting. They said they were going to bring back that there were going to be burnt offerings. There were altars and everything for burnt offerings. This made me wonder, since there have been no sacrifices for so long, since there hasn't been a temple that has existed since the year, 70 AD. Are they going to restart those sacrifices later on? Or is it going to come back? Because as Christians, we believe that Jesus was that final sacrifice. He was the sacrifice to end all of those sacrifices. You don't really need to do that anymore because God made the ultimate sacrifice. So, according to the book of Ezekiel, there's these people called the Zedekites, right? And that they're going to be distinguished from the Levites. I found that to be pretty interesting. They were actually the sons of Zadok, who traced his Levitical lineage to Aaron through Aaron's son Eleazar. Now Zadok served as a priest under David along with Abiathar, and he was appointed chief priest during Solomon's reign because he supported Solomon as the king. The Zedekites were elevated at that point a little higher than the Levites, and the Levites were kind of demoted out of concern for ritual purity, which is actually a dominant subject in chapter 40 through chapter 46 that we're talking about here. Now, while the angel, we get to chapter 41, previously the angel brought Ezekiel through the temple and through all the different gates and things with him. When they get to the great hall, only the angel went into the next room because that was the most holy place. Remember that holy of holy places? Only the angel went in there. Ezekiel did not. And this kind of corresponds with the restrictions that were given in the law in Leviticus 16 and Hebrews 9 because he was not allowed in there. He was not one of those few that were allowed to be in there. So, historically speaking, this is a big old thing. So let's think about this, and let's think about the area that it's in right now. You've got Ezekiel's temple. If you look down at the bottom right-hand corner there, look at the size of an American football field compared to Ezekiel's temple here. You could probably fit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 8 or 10 football fields inside that temple. That is enormous. If you look back at Solomon's temple and the size of an American football field, it was maybe a little bit smaller than one football field. And Herod's temple might have took 3, maybe 4 football fields inside of it worth of size. So this is an enormous structure. So a little bit of the history here. Of course, Solomon's temple was destroyed in 586 BC by the Babylonians. We just got done reading about that. But there was another temple built. It actually got started being built around 516 BC. And it got destroyed around 70 AD by the Romans. It was actually in August of 70 AD when the Romans came through and destroyed it. Now, Herod's given credit for this temple because the original temple that was built was a lot smaller than what you see here. What Herod did is he came in and he just remodeled it all, refurbished a lot of it, and then expanded the temple big time during his reign. And he got a bad name from doing this as well because he raised the taxes so high to do it. The people suffered. It was a horrible experience for the people. So even though he did this great thing as Solomon did, he didn't do it in the way that Solomon did. So what you do is maybe not as important as how you do it sometimes, because the way you do things is going to determine your legacy more so than what you actually finished accomplishing. Because Herod accomplished a way bigger and way more beautiful temple than Solomon ever did, but he is not one of the better people for the job. So what's on the site today? Well, guess what? It's may or may not be the site, but here stands the Dome of the Rock. And the Dome of the Rock is actually an Islamic shrine. And where it sits now is where a lot of people think that King Solomon's temple was and the second temple was. But this may or may not be true because archaeologically speaking, they haven't found exactly anything that resembles the temple. And even Jesus in the New Testament says you're not even going to find a stone. The temple is going to be destroyed so bad you won't even find a piece of rock from it, so you'll never know that it existed. And in some of the words here in Ezekiel chapter 40 and 41 may refer to a different place for this temple to be built, because I'm going to tell you, this right here, the Dome of the Rock, where it sits right now, looks like this. There it is. And if you think about comparing the size of Ezekiel's temple to Solomon's temple and Herod's temple, Ezekiel's temple wouldn't fit there. I mean, they'd have to bulldoze all kinds of stuff, and they would have to bulldoze that structure right there, the Dome of the Rock. And if that happened, if one little piece of stone was messed up by a Christian of that Islamic temple site, it would be World War III. Let's just face it, it would be World War III. So I'm going to say that since this was built in 691, and it actually collapsed in 1015, and they rebuilt it in 1022 to 1023. It's been standing there that long. This is actually one of the oldest Islamic architectural structures in the world, and it's still standing today. And if we did anything to destroy that, it would be World War III. Maybe that's what the intention is, but I don't know. What do you think? Do you think this is where the third temple is going to be built? Or do you think it's not? That is kind of the question for the day. Where is that temple going to be built? I hope this has touched you. If it has, click that like button, that subscribe button. Click that little jingle bell so you can get notified the next time I upload a video. And also hit the little boxing glove so we can rumble together on Rumble. And I will see you tomorrow for another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. We'll see you then.